Like the World War II and the Vietnam War, the Chinese Communist Revolution, also known as the Chinese Civil War, was one of the bloodiest wars that ever took place. What were the significant effects of Mao's victory in the Chinese Communist Revolution? Mao's victory in the Chinese Communist Revolution led to various significant effects. 1. The birth of social and economic reforms and their unforeseen side effects. 2. Changes in mainland China's international political relationships. And 3. Crimes against humanity. Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, won the Chinese Communist Revolution and declared the foundation of the People's Republic of China in October 1949, after defeating his political enemy Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Nationalist Party of China. While it is true that Chiang's defeat was unavoidable mainly due to the internal corruption and lack of morale within the Nationalist Party, Mao's victory had not been guaranteed from the very beginning, since the Chinese Revolution of 1911, in which the Sun Yat-sen of the Nationalist Party overthrew the last imperial dynasty of China. Chiang Kai-shek, Sun Yat-sen's successor, was originally deemed the leader of China, and his status remained until the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, which is better known as the Second Sino-Japanese War today, and was a main cause for the severe weakening of Chiang's army and power. Chiang's emphasis on not relying on the Communist Party, as well as internal corruption and decrease in the morale of his political party and troops, eventually led to his downfall. Afterwards, Chiang retreated to Taiwan and became its dictator, while Mao Zedong, as the new leader of China, quickly placed new reforms to revolutionize his country based on his communist ideologies. Nevertheless, Mao was unable to foretell the significant drawbacks of the changes he brought to China. Mao's victory in the Chinese Communist Revolution brought about the deployment of social and economic reforms and their consequent negative effects. The Great Leap Forward was an industrial revolution intended to promote economic growth for all social classes and involve many construction projects. Among them, the projects related to construction of irrigation systems and dams were infamous for the requirement of extreme labor and mismanagement of government officials. In addition, a Chinese author of a scholarly article, Dongping Han, delineates the cycle of agricultural seasons in China and explains how farmers, who severely lacked food after harvest, originally had eaten minimum food portions to last long winters until the spring. He adds that this was aggravated by severe management problems and physically demanding projects in comparison to the shortage of food rations during the Great Leap Forward. He describes about the famine and the actual living conditions that were beyond malnutrition. Furthermore, Mao's economic and social reforms to enhance the economy of the country exacerbated the inflation that had already taken place in China since the Opium Wars. Mao was one of the great unifiers, but in the end, he was a disaster, said A. Doug Barnett, a professor of political science at Johns Hopkins University. Roderick McFarquhar, a professor of history and political science at Harvard University, also explains how Mao's social revolution ended China's growth and led to negative consequences, how 25 million to 30 million people died of starvation in the Great Leap Forward, and how China struggled as Mao sought to reconstruct the nation. The repercussions of Mao's reforms eventually caused China to go into a social and economic decline for numerous years. Mao's victory in the Chinese Communist Revolution also brought significant changes to mainland China's foreign affairs. Mao's emphasis on the development of nuclear weapons led the United States to fear the spread of communism, which caused the establishment of the containment policy in the United States. The doctrine of containment promoted interventionism and led the United States to partake in proxy wars, such as the Korean War in the mid to late 1900s. While it is true that the US involvement in the Korean War was partly due to the Cold War against the Soviet Union, who had also been involved, Dalek denotes Mao's amicable relationship with North Korea and his plans to expand communism as the influences that pushed the US to war and faced numerous deaths consequently. In addition, the rapid deployment of nuclear weapons in China led the United Nations and the Western Hemisphere to recognize People's Republic of China as China instead of Taiwan. Although Taiwan had initially been recognized by the United Nations during the Chinese Civil War, the People's Republic of China gained recognition when Huang Hua, the first UN representative for PRC, was formally acknowledged as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. This demonstrates Mao's great influence, as only the most powerful nations and the victors of the World War II were permanent members of the UN Security Council and could veto any decisions of the Council. Mao's victory and focus on advancement in military technology allowed his country, People's Republic of China, to be properly acknowledged by the rest of the world. Mao's rule over mainland China caused crimes against humanity, crimes that are deliberately committed against the population, to take place in various forms: rape, cannibalism, and torture. Girls across China were forced to endure rape during the Cultural Revolution. Professor Decotter depicts the horrors of China in the 1960s when he says, "After 1968, millions were sent to the countryside after they finished school, some of whom were girls as young as 14. Thousands of young girls were left at the mercy of villagers and raped." People turned against one another and resorted to violence and brutality as Mao's mass purges led to a drive of bloodlust and cruelty. The disorder and toleration of rape within the government led to violent upheavals that were often described as hysterical. In addition, cannibalism was practiced in many parts of China, even to the point where it was considered a ritual and villagers exchanged babies for food. McPhee describes, at one school in Wuxiang, in the south of the country, students beat their geography teacher Wu Shufang to death, then forced another teacher to rip out his heart and liver, which the pupils barbecued and ate. Such gory events that commonly took place show how Mao's Cultural Revolution brought a frenzy in which the side effects exceeded the benefits of the reform. While many Chinese historians praise Mao Zedong and state that Mao's plans of reconstruction brought mostly positive effects, the substantial evidence states otherwise. For instance, Han's article mainly claims that Mao's reconstruction brought benefits, despite the drawbacks, and explains about how the people of China had initially been hopeful about a better future from the irrigation projects during the Great Leap Forward. On the other hand, it is certainly difficult to ignore the severe casualties Mao's economic reform brought: inflation, shortage of food, and the consequent hunger and malnutrition of the people. Furthermore, though many Chinese citizens continue to praise Mao as a national hero who united China, historians accredit the current status and great developments to Deng Xiaoping, who became the leader of China after Mao's death. Historians say, under Mr. Deng's tutelage, the communists have abolished Mao's cherished rural communes, returning to private family farming, and the economy has grown 8% a year, 6 times the recent average rate in Eastern Europe. By changing China's approach to a more active status in foreign affairs, Deng was able to develop China to a great extent, despite a few unforeseen side effects. Moreover, the Chinese government has not revealed communist archives until a few years ago to those outside China, and the government has prohibited the publication of books that criticize Mao Zedong. This portrays how the Chinese people are unable to access documents that provide the truth. From the lack of access to the truth, the government blinds its own people from evaluating and learning from the history of the past. Thus, with misconceptions masking the eyes of the citizens, Mao Zedong cannot be objectively observed. In conclusion, the negative drawbacks of Mao's socio-economic reforms, changes in China's political relationships and foreign affairs, and the birth of crimes against humanity are the consequences Mao's victory brought. While Mao's victory may have been inevitable, the millions of deaths and the violence could have been prevented had Mao been more considerate for his people rather than for the execution of his own political ideology. It is essential to remember that a person is neither wholly good nor bad, as a strong leader may also hurt his own people, albeit his solicitous intentions.